So Professor Maulik, I think I can't hear you.
Hello?
Yes, yeah, now I can. Yes.
Yeah.
Sir, can you hear me now?
Louder.
So I think the audio is still not clear from your side. I think that's
Yeah, unmute. Unmute this.
yeah, I think it's still not very audible.
Audio clear.
So one thing that sometimes happens is if you choose a different audio connection, maybe it hasn't recognized the right audio device.
Manos, if you remove your headphone, then maybe sometimes the headphone problem is there. Sometimes you remove the start and tell. I think.
Right.
Can you hear me now?
Without.
Yes, now it's better.
It
Yeah,
is
yeah.
better. You start.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I think good morning, everyone. Let's begin with this new normal concept that we are now used to. That is having kept with us these days, working from at home. Land and abroad speakers. Today we have once again met for a national webinar on capacity building and career guidance. And today we have Dr. Chakraborty, Professor of Economics, University of California, Davis. And to begin with, we'd like to have a welcome address from our Honorable Principal Maharaj, Swami Kamalastana. Over to Maharaj. Maharaj?
University of California, Davis. He is with us in this webinar session, and particularly my students, I tell that our capacity building and career guidance, it is in this series now this session we are happy to have Dr. Anujit Chakraborty, Assistant Professor, UC Davis. And it is our great pleasure that Dr. Chakraborty
Shall I start?
and now he is established in USA as
So I think, Maharaj, I think you got disconnected because your audio is off. I can't hear you.
oh, my audio is off. Okay.
Right, it got switched off, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, my switched off. So it is actually this yes. So I important thing started this webinar. It is the series of webinar we have organized. It is one of this webinar. And in this webinar, we are happy to have Dr. Anujit Chakraborty, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, University of California, Davis. And it is our very that Dr. Chakraborty happens to be our very beloved student of Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Centenary College. Now he is established in USA as Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, University of California. And regarding the introduction of this speaker, my coordinator, my convener of this webinar, he will afterwards he will do this. But in my part, I just, apart from the introduction, I tell the participants, students, that today's our learning speaker, a very uh, interesting person in this sense, that this Chakraborty started his journey from college. After that, he is a good student in electronics in University. Now from electronics, he has switched over to economics, and now he has actually a leading person in behavioral economics. Is a very, very important and emerging field in economics. And I do not say economics, behavioral economics. Yeah, in afterwards, it will be a very, very important thing in all subjects because it's unique and it's a very field to accommodate different subjects. I'm telling this person, not that he is a very intellectual person, he is not. It is, I am telling a person, his journey from knowledge to more knowledge, from knowledge to more and more knowledge. Swami Vivekananda is power. So we know the so many power, that is chemical power, physical energy, physical power. But we are talking about intellectual power, power of speech, power of mind. So this Dr. Chakraborty is a living example to you. Uh, is actually now assistant professor of university. So all the participants actively participate in this webinar and enjoy. And afterwards, you write all your queries to chat box. After this talk, our coordinator and I also, if I get time, I also conduct the question and answer session. He will gladly answer all the questions. What actually is talk? This talk is very exciting, very interesting. I do not tell. This our Manos Babu, Manos Professor Maulik, he will tell. So with this word, I once again heartily welcome him for joining in this webinar, for his consent as a resource person in this webinar. From on behalf of the college, on behalf of all the students, all the participants, all the teacher, all the staff member, I once again welcome you, Dr. Chakraborty, and also I thank all of the participants for joining in this webinar in this very, very beautiful morning in India. But he's talking from USA, it is evening at that time. So thanks all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj. So we have just listened to and welcome speech by our Honorable Principal Maharaj, Swami Kamalasananda. And before we move on to our eminent speaker from faraway California, David, so we'll listen to Dr. Anujit Chakraborty. But before we listen to his commencement speech, I would like to just introduce him a bit. As Maharaj has already told us that he has passed from our own college, Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Centenary College. Dr. Chakraborty is an assistant professor of economics at University of California, Davis. He received his PhD in economics from the University of British Columbia under Professor Yoram Halevi in 2017. He has previously received a bachelor's degree in electronics engineering from Jadavpur University and his master's in economics from the Indian Statistical Institute. Dr. Chakraborty works in an intersection of economic theory, behavioral economics, and experimental economics. His recent works includes the characterization of procrastination and present bias behavior, and establishing link between choice paradoxes in the domain of risk and client behavior. He has many publications, and in the reviewed journals, he has delivered many talks in the international seminar and symposium. So we now listen to the commencement speech of our eminent speaker, Dr. Anujit. Welcome, sir.
So thank you for the very kind words, and thank you for inviting me here today. And I say this to the dear professors at VC College, dear Maharaj, all the staff members, and most importantly, the graduating class of 2020. As Maharaj said, and if you're still wondering why my background is dark, that is because it is night in California and it's around 10:15 p.m. So it's like a 12-hour difference between Kolkata and California. And we have this routine that I call up my parents every day, and we have this daily routine that, like, I've told my parents that it's a 12-hour difference. And when we wish goodbye, so if I'm saying good day, then they have to say good night to me, and when I say good night, they have to say good day to me, because it's a 12-hour difference. Now, just as a general request to you all. So at any point, if the audio gets cut or the video gets cut, I would not be able to understand it from my side, but please do tell me if that's happening, and I'll adjust my laptop accordingly to accommodate whatever I have to change. Now it's been almost 15 years now since I graduated from VC College. So 15 years is a huge time. And I don't know if the current graduate students or the students who are graduating in 2020 know this, but back in 2005, when I graduated, classes for 11 and 12 were also taught at the college. And, it has changed since, and it's been quite a while since it has changed. And just so that, I can connect with the current students, I want to tell these two things about my college life in VC College, okay? So the first one is this very short, one-liner thing, that every time we had a gap between classes in college, right, we would run to this playground called the Kostiker Mart to play football. And I don't know if people still do that, but I really hope people still have some playground to themselves where they can run, and between classes they can go and play cricket or football or whichever sport they want. Sorry. Maharaj, you tell something?
No.
Okay. So so that's the first story. The second story is a slightly longer one, and a funnier one perhaps, is one of these classmates of mine. Let's just call this person Shayantan Chatterjee, for example. Okay. And this classmate of mine, who was also a mischievous fellow, was trying to give a proxy attendance on behalf of another friend of ours. And let's call this person Ratul Banerjee for some reason, okay? So the names don't matter. These are fictitious names that I've chosen. But what's really matters is that these two friends had different surnames. One was Chatterjee, one was Banerjee, okay? And the friend who was Chatterjee was trying to give a proxy attendance on behalf of the other friend. Now, the professor who was taking attendance at the college at that point of time, he was a seasoned professor, and he was a very perceptive person. And spelling something fishy, he called out this Chatterjee friend of mine and asked him, "Tor naam ki?" Right? This is just, the professor's way of kind of challenging the fact that it seems like this guy is fishy and he's giving a proxy attendance. Now, this Chatterjee friend of mine, who wasn't willing to give up yet that, he was doing something wrong, stood up and said that his name is Ratul Banerjee, which is, the name of the person for whom he was giving the proxy. Now, we as part of the whole class knew what was happening. And, we were waiting in anticipation to see what happens next. Now, next, the professor asked, Shayantan that, Acha tor baban naam ki? That, and Shayantan, in his infinite folly, give away, the true name of his own dad, Mr. Chatterjee, and thus got caught in the act because, of the conflicting last names. It was, one of these, it became kind of this running joke in our class that, this guy who tried to give, he almost, got away with it because when he was asked the name, he stood up and lied. But when he was asked his dad's name, he kind of got caught. Okay, so now, moving on from, these two stories from, back in the days to some more serious topics, right? And when Maharaj invited me to give this speech, I initially had a different speech in mind. Okay, and I thought I would talk about something else. And today I read it again and I completely rewrote it today. And I had to ask Maharaj to change the topic of the talk accordingly because I had completely changed the speech. And I was telling one of my friends today that how intimidated I am at the thought of delivering kind of like a graduate speech to new graduates and postgraduates at a university. I've never done anything like this before, and I'm not trained to do this, right? So there are certain things I'm trained to do that I feel a bit more confident about, and this is something I have no training in. And when I think about this, ideally, we would not be in a COVID situation, and we would be face to face, and we would be able to talk, in person, which is impossible because of the COVID situation. And if I still imagine all of you sitting together here, in front of me, the first thing that I would think is that we are perhaps, all different people. We come from different places. I'm from Barakpur, somebody's from Khorda, somebody's from Kollani, somebody's from outside of West Bengal, maybe, right? And we have lived different lives, we have had different friends, but I think that there are certain things which are common in all of us. There are certain kinds of struggles that we face that are often similar. And the hope of this speech today is that hopefully, some of the things that I have learned from my struggles and my failures since my graduation from this college in the last 15 years, some of these lessons would still apply equally to all of you, right? And that's the hope behind this speech. Okay, that's the hope behind all of the things that I'm going to say after this point onwards. And I'm going to particularly talk about these three lessons that I've learned in the last 15 years since I graduated from VC College. So, starting from the start, the journey post VC College, that started in 2005, on my graduation. And this was a time when, I was just graduating from class 12. I had just, sat on the WB joint entrance examination, the West Bengal board joint entrance. And I was super excited to be joining in electronics engineering because this was a stream that I thought would be a great fit for me, right? I enjoyed doing maths and physics, and I thought that going into electronics engineering would be the perfect fit given my interests. And I was a student of the school Ramakrishna Mission Rohora in the years before college, and those I have a lot of good memories from that. And despite that, I was really excited to be finally changing the sphere of interaction I've had because till that point, mostly my sphere of interaction was between Barakpur and Khorda, and I was excited that I'd go somewhere new, I would meet new people, I'd get to know new things, and it would be a completely new experience. And despite the high hopes that I had post graduation from VC College, academically speaking, the next couple of years at JU was, to be honest, a bit disappointing for me. And I think this falls in line with this general kind of observation that life is not always what you expect it to be. Now, if I think back about, why were those 2 years kind of disappointing for me, partly it was the outdated engineering curriculum that we had been assigned, right? So I was someone who was excited to do more maths and physics, and we didn't really have, maths and physics being taught as much, right? Partly it was the fact that I had a grueling everyday commute from Barakpur to Jadavpur, and, you have to change trains in Shialda, and the trains are super crowded on the way back because basically if you're traveling to do classes, you are synchronous with the office going crowd. And there's a huge number of people who travel on those trains because they have to go to offices in Kolkata. So the trains were always crowded, and by the time I'd be back home, I would feel drained, right? But if I were to be honest with myself, what really made a difference in terms of this disappointment was actually a lack of direction that I felt in the first couple of years of Jadavpur University. So let me try and explain this point a bit more. So, you see, I'd grown up with this singular goal of somehow cracking the joint entrance exam and becoming an engineer, all the way till that. So, my dad was a professor of physics, and he had these really good students who would, do really well on the joint entrance exam, and, they would end up becoming, either engineers and doctors. And for me, growing up, that was the aspiration that I grew up with, that I somehow needed to do well on this one particular exam, and then and that would be the culmination of all the studying that I was doing. So in a way, you could say that that's the kind of mindset a lot of us had in those days, and perhaps even today, that you really build all your expectations towards that one exam and what happens after. And I did exactly that. Right now, what happened is, I did really well on the exam, to be honest, and then I got into electronics engineering, which was really coveted. But once I got in there, right, I quickly realized that every person who enters this engineering department graduates rather easily. So you don't really need to put in a lot of effort to graduate in 4 years. And everyone who graduates gets, at least a software job, maybe a better job, and all the jobs have a decent salary. At least they did back in those days. And what happened is I realized that, till this point, there was a clear feedback mechanism that, you put in more effort, you do better in class, you put in more effort, you get better opportunities. And this was the first time that I felt that I was in a situation, I was under some kind of an institution where, at least in my eyes, it felt like, nothing really mattered anymore because everyone got a job. And the jobs were good enough, and I was happy with, at that point when I was just joining Jadavpur in the first 2 years, I just thought that I'd be happy just getting one of those jobs that everyone gets. And here is something that is interesting. Now, this is how I thought, but this is not how everyone else thought in my class. So there were others, classmates of mine, who actually did not feel similarly. And from the very beginning of the program in 2005, they knew that they wanted to do really well on all the courses. They wanted to impress the professors, get very good letters of recommendation, and then apply abroad for a PhD in engineering after appearing on the GRE exam. Right? So now, I mean, here is something, that's interesting that I realized at that point. So if you took, me, and if you took, some of those classmates of mine, it would be difficult to separate us on the basis of our academic standings in, let's say, all the exams that we had appeared in so far. That, we got into the same engineering stream because we had similar ranks, and, we came from, privileged institutions and, good institutions. And, we were very comparable, and we were equals when we entered the program. But these people who just, had this motivation that they wanted to do good because they wanted to get the PhD and they wanted to get the letters of recommendation, they were doing much better than me in college over these first 2 years, right? And, as I said, the classes weren't interesting, the curricula was backdated, and that was true for both of us, like for me and those friends of mine. But it did not stop those guys from working hard on their own, trying to learn on their own, and, working super hard on the things that they wanted to do to get really good placements in, some master's or PhD program after the bachelor's degree in engineering. And in a way, this was kind of a humbling experience for me. So, there were this bunch of these classmates of mine who I had considered equals during, much of this time. And I just realized that, these people who were my equals were doing better than me. And they were doing better than me justly. It wasn't, by some unfair means. They were just working harder. They had more drive than me to do things, that they were doing. And it was humbling in a second way. It was humbling also in the way that I realized that, whatever I thought I had achieved till that point, right? Whatever the score on the Madhyamik exam or the Uच्च Madhyamik or the joint, right? All of those were shouldn't have been attributed to myself, but rather those should have been attributed to the drive that my parents and my teachers at my school and college had instilled in me throughout my childhood. Because I was the same person throughout. I hadn't changed. It's just that, the drive was not there anymore. The drive that was given to me by my parents and my teachers. And once I didn't have the drive, I wasn't really excelling at the level that I thought I should have excelled at. And I realized that, it wasn't really me who was, different. It was just that the drive wasn't there. And it was a humbling experience because you just realize that the you know the the thing that really makes you do well or do bad is sometimes even outside of yourself. It's your environment that kind of builds into you this passion or this drive. And when I look back now, I think I feel that I learned something valuable there, right? I learned that achievement in our society has got a lot to do with having the drive to succeed and excel, and having the motivation to succeed and excel. And perhaps having this motivation, perhaps having this drive, this single mindedness is a bit neglected in our meritocratic society, where we attribute a big chunk of people's successes to their raw talents instead, right? We worship Messi, we worship Ronaldo, we worship Einstein, and they're extraordinary individuals. And for them, of course, it was their pure intellect or pure skill with the football which made a difference. But for most other people, who are not geniuses at their level, one of the big factors that's kind of not talked about enough is the motivation or drive that they have, to improve themselves and to excel. And I think, that's something that I learned in those first 2 years at Jadavpur, that, that's something I'm missing. And that brings me, as I said, I'm going to talk about 3 life lessons that I learned in the last 15 years. And that was the first life lesson that, I learned and I want to share with you all. That it's really important to have a drive. It's really important to think of the next step and also the step after. Because, having this vision, having this, single-mindedness, this goals can make all the difference in what your experience and performance are in the current phase of your life. Okay, so that's the first lesson that I think I learned right out of, my journey from VC college. So at this point, you might be thinking that, okay, this lecture kind of got off to a depressing start, right? So I promise to you that the next 2, lessons that I learned and that we'll talk about are going to be more optimistic. So Jadavpur University lasted for 4 years, so it wasn't just 2 years. And the next 2 years, after the first 2 years, were very formative for me. And I'll tell you how and why. So I met some very interesting people. And this is a thing that universities often do to you, because in universities you have people who are there to study all kinds of different disciplines. There's people who are studying literature, there are people who are studying sciences, engineering, and you have this mishmash of these very intelligent people who are studying all different things. So I met people who were very well read on various different topics, and various different international authors. They were aware of international politics. They watched international movies, and when you get in touch with people like that, you learn from them. And I learned a lot from them, right? I got positively influenced by them. And one of these people happened to be someone who was doing economics. And this person used to come to me and talk about economics and what they learned in class that day. And this got me interested in economics. So this was a phase when I wasn't that interested in engineering anymore. But this person used to come and talk about economics, in our discussions. And this was my first foray into economics. I got to learn about it. And this was around the same time that, so this is around 2007, 2008. So, around 2, 3 years after my graduation from VC college. And I was just getting to know about, the financial crisis that was going to hit USA and then the rest of the world. So economics was, really in the news, big time. And just to know about, more economics from another friend of yours, that really did influence me in a lot of positive ways. And it just didn't end there. This person also gave me the textbooks to study economics, right? And I started preparing for entrance examinations at, around this time I started preparing for the entrance examinations at 3 different institutes, which allowed people from different academic backgrounds to go for a master's in economics degrees. Okay, so the 3 institutes were Delhi School of Economics, Indian Statistical Institute, there's one in Delhi and one in Kolkata. and then also Indira Gandhi Institute of Development and Research. And I got to know that these three programs exist, and I got to know how to study for them simply because I had the friends who were kind enough to point me towards the resources. Okay, and here is kind of, I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes trying to explain what I learned from this experience. And this is kind of a truism. And it is the following, that the people who you surround yourself with are going to determine what you get to know about the world, what you learn, and what habits you pick up on the way, and what knowledge you accumulate on the way. So there is this famous saying which kind of summarizes this in one very, let's say, a mathematical way. It says that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So if these are really good 5 people, then you're going to be good because you're going to be positively influenced by them, because the average of 5 good things is something good. If you have 5 negative people, then the average of 5 negative numbers is negative. So you're going to have a negative influence on yourself. And that's the kind of person you're going to end up being. Right? So this is kind of, the value of surrounding yourself with the right kind of people. And, sometimes, at least for myself, I've just been lucky. It's not that I've put in effort there, but perhaps I should, going forward, I should put in more effort into this, because it has made a huge difference to my life at every juncture. Okay, so after ending my degree of after graduating from Jadavpur University with a BTech, I then actually went on to do a master's in economics. And during this master's in economics, I again had a very dear friend and a roommate of mine, with whom I had endless discussions about economics and economists and what are the problems with economics. And we used to go on long walks, and this person is still my best friend. And these discussions with this guy, it really shaped my interest and enthusiasm for studying economics. And to be honest, this kind of culminated in my decision of pursuing a PhD in economics thereafter, right? And my career just took a new turn after that. I went to do a PhD, and then post PhD I got a faculty position. Okay, so again, trying to bring it all back together, we all learn a lot from our parents while growing up, and they are the biggest influences we have as we grow up. And my parents were my biggest influences. As I said, the drive that I had, that enabled me to do whatever I did till I went to college, was instilled in me through my parents and the teachers I had. Right? But as we grow, right, we have to get more and more better influences and good influences in our lives, because two is good. You have 2 parents, and that's good, but more than two is even better, right? So that's the second lesson really that I learned. That you need to have good friends, and you need to surround yourself with positive and good people, and they are going to have a huge influence in what kind of a person you end up becoming, and what kind of experiences you have, and what kind of knowledge you accumulate on the way. Now, if you are a person who is going to travel abroad or out of state after this graduation for either another degree or for a job, then the same advice holds for you, but even more urgently, right? Why? Because as you travel abroad, as you travel outside of state, you'd have to reset your whole social circle from zero. You'd be far away, sorry, you'll be far away from all your friends. You'll be far away from all the friends that you made in school and college. You'll be far away from your family, your true well-wishers, your parents, your relatives. And you would really need a support system of friends and a community of supportive people to stick with you through the thick and thin. Okay, so that's kind of the second thing that I learned, as I made my transition from master's to PhD, and through all these years. And, I've been lucky to have these friends all these years, right? And luck plays a huge part in the person we end up being. And this is a story of just me being lucky. But there's also a lesson that I learned there, that, the extent to which you can learn from your friends is huge. And the influence they can have on you is huge. Now, this brings me to the third and final lesson that I learned in the last 15 years. I mean, maybe I've learned more lessons, but it's the last one that I want to talk about, because I don't want to bore you with a super long speech. And it's interesting because it's not really a lesson that I learned. I would rather say it's a lesson that I relearned during the last 15 years. And the story goes back to my second year of PhD, when I was making a transition from, coursework, so taking courses, to research. Now, for those of you who are unaware of how PhD programs in the USA often work, so I'll just tell you how this works. So generally, as you come in for the PhD, there's first 1 or 2 years of coursework. And in the coursework, basically, you take courses and there's exams. And, everyone's a good student generally, so everyone does well. And at the end of the coursework, you transition to research, right? And it's this transition period, around the first or second year, where a lot of people, including me, face a lot of difficulty. And the reason is simple, because research is often about coming up with something novel. And the spark of novelty can often be elusive and difficult to come by, right? And it's we had this professor who gave us this great example to explain why coursework, taking classes, and research is vastly different. And we had this meeting where he came and he said that, how many of you like watching movies? And we all raised our hands and we all said, oh, we love watching movies, right? And then he asked us, how many of you do you think would be able to produce and direct movies, right? How many of you would even like to do that? And we weren't sure if we would like to do that. And then it was a simile. He was trying to give us an example. So when you're a student, when you're just learning about what Newton's research was, what Einstein's research was, what Avogadro's research was, you're a consumer of their research. You're a consumer, just like we are a consumer of movies. Someone else made those movies. and we watch those movies and we are a consumer of those. Just like students are a consumer of knowledge. The knowledge that has been created by all these guys, like Einstein said, we are able to look far because we stand on the shoulder of giants in the field of science and arts and literature, who have given us all these innovations and these novelties. So when you are making this transition from coursework to research, you're basically making the transition from a consumer of knowledge to a producer of knowledge, and that's a significant transition. That's nothing like anything you've done before. We keep making transitions, right? So from class 10 to 11, there is a transition because the physics gets more mathematical. Then from 12 to college, it's a transition because now you're more independent and you're studying new things, and all these transitions happen throughout your life. But the transition that we did in our second year of PhD just felt like a much bigger transition, you know, in a lot of different ways. And we all, everyone in our cohort suffered in the transition because, getting a novel research idea and, working on it successfully is difficult. It's really difficult. So I, for example, was working on, trying to prove a particular theorem that I had conjectured to be true sometime around my second or third year. So I thought that, this would be a mathematical result, which would be true, but I had no idea how to prove it for most of my graduate life. Okay. Now, sorry, I haven't been talking for long, for a few days now, and because I'm talking longer, I'm coughing. So this theorem that I was trying to prove, most people would not care about the theorem and would not know the theorem at all, and it would make no difference in their life at all. But for me, right, it was everything. It was the most important theorem that there could be, right? And my day to night, I would just try and prove a result about the theorem, right? And there were countless days when everything new that I had tried, everything that was new and I could try, I had tried that, and I still hadn't succeeded, right? And those were some pretty frustrating days, and it wasn't just me. It wasn't just me. We all, right? Everyone in our program was going through the same phase, right? So, we were going to bed with no idea about what's the new step I was going to try the next morning, because everything I tried this day had not worked out, right? And even in your sleep, all of us would despair about everything that did not work out on that day. And we would dread waking up the next day, and thinking that it's going to be the same. Things didn't work out yesterday. What guarantees things will work out today? What guarantees things will work out tomorrow? So, it was something that created a lot of anxiety and, I'd say despair among all of us. And those were indeed very tough days, some of the toughest days I've gone through. And one thing that really helped me through this process, and I discussed this with my friends, and they agreed with this. And what helped me was this advice that I had received while I was still a student of high secondary school. And which is why when I started talking about this, I said, this is not a lesson that I really learned, it's a lesson that I relearned during these last 15 years. So I had this mathematics teacher who used to say that whenever you face a math problem that just looks too difficult and that you've never seen before, you should not just sit there wondering about how difficult it is. Instead, you should just try to take the first step that you can think of in terms of solving the problem. Don't think about whether you'll be able to solve it, or whether whatever you're going to do is going to work out, and whether you're going to be successful or not. Don't think about it for now. Just think about the first step that you can think about in terms of solving this problem. Just write that down. If necessary, break the problem down into small chunks and then try and tackle the smallest and the least intimidating bit that you can see. Right? And this was, if you think about it, it's a really simple exercise. If you want to philosophize about it, right, you can think about if Krishna told Arjuna the same in Bhagavad Gita, that don't think about what comes out of it, just think about your job right now. But I don't want to philosophize about it. It was just a simple rule that was given to me when I was a student by a maths teacher. And I survived the most difficult days of my grad school based on this simple rule. And I think it was one of the most valuable lessons that I've learned, right? And it's the following, that, the particular example I gave was proving this theorem, but it's a bit more general than that. Life often throws challenges at you. They could be personal or professional in nature, that are so difficult that you feel like you just don't have it in you to face it, right? You just feel like you could do anything, but it's not going to work out. It's just not going to work out. And you just don't feel like doing anything about it because it's so damn hard and so damn challenging, right? You just feel this negative emotion about even facing it. But what I learned is that you shouldn't just stall there. You shouldn't just give up, but rather you should try and take the smallest step that you think you can take, just the smallest one. If possible, break it down into small pieces, the whole problem, and just face the smallest difficulty or the smallest level on that. Now, I'm talking about this in generality. So depending on the situation, it is the smallest step could be as simple as cleaning up your study desk, cleaning up the room that you're in, or cooking the next meal, or drafting a difficult email to your supervisor or your boss or to some other important person in your life. Or it could be the first equations that come to your mind if you're trying to solve a theorem, a mathematical theorem. Whatever it is, just take the first step, just the simplest first step. And then just keep taking these very small steps every day. And don't worry about what's going to happen 10 days down the line. Every day, just keep taking these very small steps. And I promise to you that all these small steps would add up as days pass. And with every passing day, the problem would look smaller and less intimidating. And you just keep at it. And one day, you realize that you would be able to overcome this problem that you thought was insurmountable the first time you laid your eyes on it. Okay? So that for me was perhaps the most important lesson that I learned during these last 15 years, during my struggle with, changing streams, doing research, doing the transition from, let's say, coursework to research. That really has been, the one thing, if I had to take away the one big lesson that I learned, it has been this. Whenever life throws challenges at you, don't just stop. It's intimidating. Just try and take the smallest step that you can take towards solving it, just the smallest one. You don't have to try and tackle the whole thing right away, just the smallest one. And just keep doing the smallest things you can do, and they are going to add up, and things generally do work out fine in the end. Okay, so as I promised, I'm going to talk about only three things. The first one is going to be slightly more depressing, and the next two are going to be slightly more optimistic. And those were the three things I really wanted to talk about. So, on an ending note, right? I just want to tell you that there's a hugely exciting world out there for every one of you who's graduating, as a postgraduate or as an undergraduate. And the COVID crisis is here, but it's going to pass. And things are going to get better. Things are going to get way more exciting. Life will go on, and it will be back to normalcy. Very soon. Sooner than we all, you know, would really imagine. And so, just keep on doing what you're doing. You already have done something amazing by graduating, this year. And just keep doing whatever amazing things you have been doing. And, success will be at the next doorstep, if you just keep doing whatever you've been doing. So, that's all that I had to say and that I had to talk about. And I'll be super happy to take any questions that you guys might have. And thank you for being a patient audience.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So we have listened to Dr. Anujit Chakraborty, Assistant Professor of Economics, University of California, Davis. The first question that actually came is from Shivnath Dash. He said that, sir, you were saying graduating on any particular subject, we can go for Masters of Economics, on economics. Can you elaborate it once more? That is like, if he's in a different domain, how he can shift to economics?
Yes. So I think that there are particular institutes, and the three that I definitely know about is the Indian Statistical Institute. There's one in Delhi, one in Kolkata, and they have different entrance examinations. There's the Indira Gandhi Institute of Development and Research. So if you Google these, you find them very easily. And the third one is the Delhi School of Economics. And these are three institutes which do admit people at the master's level, even if they are from either a science background or an engineering background. So, of course, if you are from an economics background, of course, you're allowed to sit on the exam. But if you're from science or engineering, you are still welcome to sit on the exams. The exams are often based on both mathematics and economics. And if you're a student of science, you might already have taken enough. I mean, if you're a graduate in maths honors, of course you know enough mathematics. Even if you're a graduate in physics, you know tons of mathematics. Most people in science have taken enough math courses that the maths part will not be very challenging, perhaps, but there would be an economics exam also. So if you really want to move to economics after graduating, to do a master's in economics, what I'd suggest is, go to the websites of these institutes, look up the dates on when the exams happen, think of when the next exam is going to happen, and then think about the amount of time you have for preparation when you want to sit for the exam. Look up the syllabus, and these days with the internet, you just have tons of resources available just to learn everything on the internet. It wasn't there back in 2005, 2006, 2009. These resources weren't there, but now the internet is an amazing resource where you'll find all the kinds of books that you'll have to read and all the kinds of past exams that you might want to solve, to get an idea of how the exams look like. So I think there are at least these three institutes that I named, which do allow students from science and engineering backgrounds. And if you go to their websites and you check out the dates of the exams and syllabus, you'll have some idea about what they want to test you on. You'll also see past exams on their websites. And then if you just look, if you just Google the name of the institute and the entrance exam, you're going to see, solutions to those past exams. And you're also going to see, resources on books that you should study. And the books are easily available online, and also you can buy them. And if you have any follow-up questions on this, I'm super happy to answer those too.
Right. The second question from Sudhanshu Malu said that what type of major difficulties do you face? What type of major difficulties do you face? Challenge changing your masters.
So could you repeat the last part again? I think the audio got disconnected.
Yeah.
The major difficulties you faced when you changed your domain from engineering to
Right,
economics.
right. I think these are very good questions. So as you would expect, I mean the most major difficulty you face is that um, it's one thing that I did well on the exam, I guess, which is why I got into the master's program. But it's very difficult to supplement 3 years of proper education on your own, right? So there were people who did 3 years of economics coming into the master's, whereas I was doing engineering and I just did economics on the side and I came into the master's. So one difficulty that you'd face is you'd have a lot of people who have a lot more training in economics than you do. And training is not just about solving problems, it's also about how you think about the world. Because economics does give you a particular kind of thinking about the world, which I really didn't have going into the masters. I knew how to solve the problems because I had solved past question papers. I basically, I had cracked the exam in the classic way you crack exams. You solve past question papers, look at the patterns of how, what kind of questions come, and you try and master those questions, and then you go to the exam, and questions are often similar, and then you do well on the exam. This is how you crack most exams, right? But cracking exams and having an understanding of the subject can sometimes be a bit different. And what was most difficult for me is I still didn't have a deep grasp of the subject during the masters and also during the first year of the PhD, because I was just trying to catch up with all these other guys who had so much more training than me. Right? They had very good teachers. I didn't really have teachers. I was self-taught, and teachers make a huge difference. Right? Having good teachers, of course, makes a huge difference. So that was the major difficulty. And it's whenever you don't do as well as others are doing, you feel bad about it, and all the related psychological difficulties you have when you feel that you're behind others, right? So that's kind of what it is.
Well, the next question is from Niloy Shah. He said that, or he asked, like, if there is no way to go back, uh, when nothing is going good with us, then what can we do to overcome that situation?
Well, Nila, it's when nothing is going good, that's firstly, that's has to be a really difficult situation, right? um, well, there's just no one solution to these very difficult situations, because just by definition nothing is going good, right? So what I'd say is that um, I'll tell you what I have done in situations where I felt that nothing is going well. So one thing you could do is, if you have really good friends, and it could be your companions, it could be your classmates, maybe your parents are your best friends, right? Whoever is your friends, you should definitely consult with them about whatever you're facing. You should have someone, right, you want to consult with. If there's no friends, then maybe a counselor or a teacher or a mentor or a guardian, someone that could give you a second opinion on what things you could do. Because oftentimes what happens is, when things don't work out, we develop tunnel vision. And tunnel vision basically means that you're not able to see around. So there might be things around you which would help you, but you're not able to see those because you've developed this tunnel vision. And getting an outside opinion on these matters oftentimes make a huge difference, because the outside person you're talking with doesn't have the tunnel vision. So it could be a friend that you trust, or it could be a teacher that you trust, or it could be a counselor that you trust, or a guardian, or whoever you trust and whoever you think is a reasonable person. I think the first thing you could do is go to them and ask them for their advice. The second thing you could do is, even if you don't have someone like that, what has worked for me is I try to write down everything that didn't work out. And I also do it for technical exercises. Like, if I'm trying to prove something, and if the proof is not working out, then you generally have a few tricks that you have learned from seeing how others have proved other things. And firstly, you just try all those tricks. And for every trick that hasn't worked out, I try to write it down. It's good in two ways. One is it's good for bookkeeping, because then you know what things you've tried and they haven't worked out. But the second reason why it's good is it kind of gives structure to your thinking. And oftentimes, having some structure in your thinking, gives you a little bit of confidence. And when nothing works out, one of the things that happens is you feel really low, and you feel low on confidence. So just getting the little bit of structure and discipline in your kind of thinking can sometimes give you a little bit more confidence. And just that little bit more confidence can then help you to make some kind of breakthrough that you just weren't seeing before, right? So talk to your peers, talk to people who you trust. If you don't have someone to talk to, or even if you have someone to talk to, you should still write down why you think things are not working out, right? Write it down systematically so that you can think about it logically. Look for advice online, because if it's trying to solve a mathematical problem, there's math stack exchange or websites like that where there are mathematicians who are happy to help. If it's some other kind of problem, some personal problem, even then there's avenues online which give you brilliant advice. So personal or professional, seek help, right? That's the first thing that I'd say. Seek help from friends, from online, but people you can trust, like sources you can trust. And I think that's the first thing that I do.
Right. This next question is from Ronavir Mal. He has two questions. One is like whether you can go to economics in MSc, MSc from any background. And the second question he has is, what is the significance of economics in our current education system? Could you just elaborate?
Right. So for the first question, that can you go to economics from any background? So I think the answer might be no. So for example, if you did an honors in Bengali, right, in literature, Bengali literature, I don't know if the same institute would allow you to sit on their exams, right? So I think, so not from any background, but science and engineering, I know for sure. And of course, I guess from poli-sci, like political science, they would allow you. From economics, they would allow you, but maybe not from literature, right? But again, some of my information is outdated, because I sat on these exams, let's say 10 years back, or maybe even more. So I would just, if any of these three institutes interest you, go to their website and see what if the rules have changed now. But from what I remember, you have to be from science or engineering or economics to sit on those exams. And if you're from English literature or Bengali literature, it's no longer possible. Okay, so that's the answer to the first question. The second question was, what's the relevance of economics to education? Now, there are a few ways to interpret this question, right? So, so one interpretation that I can think of, like, I'm trying to guess, the meaning that you were looking for when you asked this question. And I think, one way to think of this question is, or one way to try and answer this question is, why should we study economics, right? I mean, why is economics an interesting subject to study? Well, what is economics? Economics is a study of human decision making, but mostly in the economic context. Now, if you think about um, the decisions and the kind of things that you do every day, there's economics behind almost everything, and we don't even realize that it's behind everything. So, for example, you can think about I'm talking on this laptop, right? And I have this webcam in front of me, and the laptop, it was given to me by the university. It cost, let's say, in Indian rupees, it would be around 50, 60,000 rupees, right? And the question is, why is it 50, 60,000? Why not 10,000? Or why not, 1 lakh? What determines the price of this laptop? Why is this more expensive than my mobile phone? My mobile phone is way cheaper. Now, why is it, why are some things more expensive? Why are some things cheaper? Right? That's a fundamental question. And if fundamental questions of, why are some people paid more money, why are some people paid less money, right? I mean, you might think things are unfair. CEOs, people who get MBAs, right, get way more money than let's say the smartest professors, the most brilliant mathematicians we have in India. The CEOs in companies get way more than the most brilliant people in mathematics. Now, why is that the case, right? I mean, if you think that the system should be meritocratic, then perhaps, the most brilliant professors should get more. The most brilliant mathematician should get more. Maybe, in Germany, Einstein should have been the highest paid professor or highest paid person, but it's not, right? And then you have to wonder that why do we have a system where these people get paid more and those people don't? Why do we have a minimum wage? Why do we have certain restrictions on economic activities? I mean, these kinds of questions, and they're fundamental questions, and they touch everyone's lives, right? Now, do we want to have a lockdown during COVID? How long do we want to have the lockdown? What's the impact of this lockdown on people and their employment? These are super relevant questions. They are super relevant for how we face the COVID crisis. And to answer those questions, once again, you have to fall back on, the economics framework and how economics thinks about these things. So, okay, so, maybe I went on too big of a rant. But if your question was about, why is studying economics interesting or important, then I'd say, these are some of the reasons that it might be interesting to someone, right? These are some of the reasons that I find it interesting, for example.
Right. Next question is from Abhijit Kumar Ghosh. He said that, sir, I'm an introvert. I want to draw such great influences like the ones that helped you get into economics, like Doritos maybe. And he said, thanks for your kind words and salute to your enthusiasm. What is no? There's no such questions as such, but he just said that how to draw that influencers in life.
So how to get influence? Okay, so so I think economics is a profession. So I'll tell you this funny story uh, that if you look at the Indians who are abroad or if you look at just the economist population, you'd find a huge number of Bengalis in the economist population. So if you look at mathematics, statistics, and economics, these three are disciplines where you find huge numbers of Bengalis. Okay, and the question is why, right? Why do we have this many? Now, for maths and stats, I think one explanation is we have Indian Statistical Institute, and basically, we had Prashanta Chandra Mahalanobis who set up this institute, and we have had this, really famous statistician who set up an institute in Kolkata and in Delhi, and Bengalis know about this and really respect mathematical education, which is one reason why we have so many Bengalis who pursue, mathematics and stats. Why in economics? Well, because in economics, it's kind of easy to get inspiration because we had Amartya Sen, and more recently we had another Nobel laureate, Abhijit, right? So Abhijit Banerjee. So if it's easy to find inspiration in economics if you're looking for it, because we have had, well, this reminds me of a second point, because we have had many successful people, right? We have, and one of the things that does encourage us is, success of other people who are like us, right? It's called the aspiration effect. When you see someone like you, when you see someone from your para, when you see someone from your school, someone from your community, someone from your state do well in something, it inspires you to do better, right? Like when Baichung Bhutia played football well, it created a whole next generation of footballers from all the northeastern states, and so this is how inspiration comes from. So it was easy for me to get inspiration because there's so many prominent economists who are Bengalis. Outside of the two people who got Nobel Prizes, there are many more that I only got to know after I got into economics. But there are many more, and it's not always. It doesn't always have to be a huge success story for it to be inspiration. I don't think that's something I wanted to say. That you just get to meet many really interesting, great people, great conversationalists who really care about academics and the scholarly pursuit, who are Bengalis and do economics. And when you talk with them and when you hear the lectures, you just get inspired. And again, in the age of internet, it's super easy to find them on YouTube. So if you want to get some inspiration, if you want to get inspiration in economics, then listen to Amartya Sen. If you want to get inspiration in physics, listen to Richard Feynman, maybe. right? So, just find someone that you really respect, and you would find the lectures online, listen to those, and I think that's how you'd get inspiration.
Next question is from Niladri Patro. He said, "Sir, will you please elaborate the role of mathematics in the research of economics?"
Right. So, it's again, it's a great question, and it's a whole can of worms, this one. So, mathematics is like economics is often about modeling how certain system would work out if you have, how do prices emerge? Like I was saying, why do we have a particular price for the laptop, and why is it more pricey than the mobile phone? Right? And that's a question of how do prices emerge. And if you think about how do prices emerge, then you want to have a model of how prices emerge. And then when you want to write down a model, you want to formalize your assumptions that go into a model, right? So if you given this is mostly a science audience, if you think about Newtonian mechanics, then there are certain assumptions about things, like we consider everything to be a particle, right? We're not going to think about the interaction that when we think about a body of mass, we're not going to think about the interaction each particle within that body of mass has. We're just going to think of that as one particle that's moving, and we're going to do some simplifying assumptions. Now it helps to write down the exact assumptions that go into the model and then give you results. It's the same is true for chemistry, right? The same is true about think about any model that you can ever write. You think about the model of an atom, right? And whenever we write down a model, we have to write down what the assumptions are. And sometimes to formalize what the assumptions are and how the outcomes are a result of the assumptions, we use mathematics, because mathematics or basically logic gives you a number of steps which takes you from where you started the assumptions to the final outcome. And so mathematics in economics is only useful to the extent that it helps us formalize the models and speak precisely about what are the assumptions in this model. Well, all assumptions are simplifying assumptions, and oftentimes they're false. But like the Newtonian model is false, and we kind of know that, but it helps us, approximate a lot of things really well. So, writing down the assumptions in a simple way that's understandable to everyone, you need a language for it, and mathematics is a good language to do that. And again, going from your assumptions to your conclusions, you need logical steps for that. And mathematics, again, is something that helps there. So, that's, the big picture story is that is why we need mathematics in economics, and not just in economics, in many other disciplines. I mean, that's why we need mathematics in physics, because we have assumptions and we want to figure out the outcomes of those assumptions.
Well, here is an interesting question from Aritro Bhattacharya. Aritro says that, is it really practical to pursue any hobby seriously, which is entirely different from my academic curriculum, in this time where employment is a big issue?
Let's try and, again, it's a very good question. So I think that I think it's impossible for us to be working at every waking hour of our lives, right? Let's say you sleep for 8 hours, and then all the bodily functions like eating and everything else, and whatever you have to do takes 2 more hours. So that's 10. And then you have 14 more hours in your day, and it's extremely difficult. I mean, there's some people who can do it, and you need a lot of strength of character to do it, but it's impossible for you to study for 14 hours a day or work for 14 hours a day, right? No one does that. So it's so if you're really facing a choice between do I want to study 14 hours a day, or do I want to keep 2 hours for my hobbies, right? That's generally an impossible comparison, because that's generally a decision we don't have to make. We still have time, right? You can study 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, and you still have 2 more hours left from whatever calculations we did. So it doesn't really have to be that you have to shun all your hobbies, all your interests, to do whatever you want to do. I don't think that's how you should think. It's really great to have the passion, and it's really good to be single-minded in your pursuit of it. But it's important that you have other hobbies. So I'll tell you this one thing that this is not my field, But there are two kinds of thinking. And there's one kind of focused thinking, and focused thinking is I give you a math problem right now, right? And suppose it's just 625 times 625, right? You can calculate the multiplication. It'll take you some time, but when you do it, you really have to do it. If your mind deviates to some other thought, you might get the calculation wrong. So that's kind of focused thinking, and that's the kind of thinking you need to solve particular kinds of problems. But there are other kinds of problems where you need diffuse thinking. And when people come up with discoveries, the research says that oftentimes you need diffuse thinking to come up with new discoveries, right? Because diffuse thinking is about you already have points in your head, like think of each point as knowledge that you acquired at some point of time. And diffuse thinking is randomly making connections between those different points that you already knew about. And diffuse thinking happens when you're not really studying, when you're doing something else. Maybe you're following your hobby. So having a hobby, or whatever it could be meditation. I don't know. That could be your hobby. It could be football. It could be cricket. It could be watching the TV. But it's good to have a hobby. It's good to have something that you do. Um, the hardcore reason is it'll give you some time for diffuse thinking, and the more practical reason is it's just impossible to work every living hour. So, might as well have some hobbies.
Right. Next question is from Devraj Day. He asked, now we are graduates, which will be an option between higher studies and competitive exams?
So I think the answer really depends on the person who asked the question, because I could think of two different people, and for one of them, higher studies might be the better option, and for the other person, competitive exams might be the better option, right? So, I mean, because, what's the better option depends on two things. One is that what you really want to do in your life, right? How do you want to see yourself? Do you want to see yourself as someone who does a PhD, or does a master's and then goes on to teach, or do you want to see yourself as going to a multinational company and working there, or do you want to see yourself as, let's say, an IAS officer for which you'd have to sit in a very competitive exam, or if you want to do an MBA. So it really depends on what you want to do, and what do you think would make you, let's not say happy, because happy is kind of too general a word. Let's say, what would make you feel satisfied about your life choices? What kind of decisions or career path do you think would make you satisfied about your life choices? So I think that is one of the preliminary things that you need to think about, what you should do next. The second thing is, you might want to think about, what do you think? Okay, so the first question is, okay, so the first question is, what do you want to do? And the second question is, what do you think you'd be better at, right? And those are not always the same. You might want to think about, what do you think you'd be better at? Do you think you're better at sitting at competitive exams and cracking them, or do you think you're better at, studying and research, and so I think the answer to it really depends on what you really like to do, and where your comparative strengths lie, right? And also depends on what stream you are in, how competitive the competitive exams are, how competitive it is to do further research. So it's really a difficult question to answer super generally. But I can tell you what are the things you should think about. You should think about what you really want to do, and what would make you satisfied about your life choices, let's say 10 years down the line. You should think about it. It's a really difficult question to think about, but you should think about it. And the second thing you should think about is, where are your comparative strengths? And perhaps thinking about those two might help you come to a good conclusion. You could talk to your professors and your teachers, and they would help you too.
Right. The next question is.
Manoj, I think many questions has come. Now actually in the California time around 11:15 or 11:20.
Yes.
And another actually student already sent question in WhatsApp, because he went an interview in NIBHM. Oh, you asked one question, after
Okay.
after that I asked in this WhatsApp question.
Okay.
Okay. And the last question. The last question is from Shrikanta Mondal. He asked, sir, should I do masters from India to get PhD in abroad, or do masters in abroad to get PhD? And what is the difference?
Right. So I think the answer depends on the following thing. So there are very few. So in economics, there are very few master's programs that give you funding while studying, right? So for most people, it's very difficult to afford studying on your own abroad during the masters just for economic reasons, right? So then what it means is, at least for economics, it definitely makes a lot of sense for most Indians to do a master's in India where everything is subsidized, education is subsidized, and it's not expensive, and then go abroad for a PhD where you will get funding because most PhD programs are funded. Whereas in engineering, right? In engineering and in I guess I don't know about the sciences because in sciences too, I think most people would rather do a master's first and then go for the PhD. In engineering, there are some paid masters where they give you scholarships. So it really depends on, can you get a scholarship for the masters? And, if you can get into a very good master's program abroad, which gives you scholarship, you could go for it. It'll be a completely different experience. But, for most people, that's very difficult. And so there's you can go to a good masters. It levels the playing field for everyone. You can do well there and then apply for a PhD where you might get full funding, and that'll be economically useful.
Right. We have a couple of
Ma-
people.
Okay,
Yes.
Manas,
Yes.
actually one question already sent by one student. He actually went to interview for NIBIGM and sent this question through WhatsApp. He requested please ask my question. So it is also my duty to ask this question. And with this question, with all your permission, we can finish and you can give the vote of thanks. Right, Manas?
Okay.
Hello.
I understood, Maharaj.
This question actually, Dr. Chakraborty, one
Yes.
student is named Padmanabha Dasgupta. He actually just doing now his went for for interview in National Institute of Biomedical Genomics. He could not attend whole your lecture, but he sent three questions in my WhatsApp. Three questions almost related. I just read the whole question. You can answer this the summation with this. First, he
But
asks,
what's the
how,
question? I'm not getting the question over here.
Manos, what you are telling?
The question is not in the live session, Maharaj, in the
No,
YouTube
no, no,
channel.
no. He has sent this question in my WhatsApp. So I am
Okay, and
reading his
you have just,
question.
I understood.
Yeah, reading. Yes, yes, yes. This is the final question, and after that you give vote of thanks. And that time will be 11:30, more than 11:30. So he asks the question, how difficult is the situation currently, and would you be in the next few years, two or more, in the US, Canada and UK, especially in reputed universities like your UC Davis, to get into a PhD, keeping in mind the critical scenario of COVID-19 outbreak and imagination immigration visa constraint for international students by the present government. Second question, what are the advantages of doing a PhD from a reputed US Canada institution against the advantage and disadvantage of Indian institute like IISc, IIT, IJAS in the light of coming back to India to join in a faculty position? Team number, as a senior of Arkham VCC College, what would be your best suggestion to your junior who aspire to be an MSc from IIT Bombay and move to PhD abroad, especially in the current critical scenario? Or would it be wise to go for an integrated PhD course in a reputed Indian institute like IISc or IJAR to avoid the uncertainty?
Right. Right. So I think as Maharaj said, the questions are kind of related. So so all very good questions. Let me try and answer the first one. So for those who might not know this, there has been a lot of uncertainty for incoming international students who were supposed to join in USA this year because of the COVID crisis, because of travel bans and all of these things. Now, if you ask me, what are the expectations? How will the situation resolve? It's really difficult to say. Things will change drastically if we suddenly have, if we suddenly develop a vaccine for it. Like as soon as we have a vaccine, as soon as it can be mass produced, things would change. Travel bans would be over. But till we have a vaccine, this question basically, boils down to the question of when do we solve the COVID crisis? And as long as we don't solve the COVID crisis, travel would be complicated, visas would be complicated. So there are two reasons why visas are complicated right now in the USA. One is because of the COVID crisis, and the second one is because Trump has a very anti-immigrant stance. Now, Trump is going up for, Trump's, president position is going up for elections in 2020 November. And, if Trump does not win, then you're going to have a new president who is going to be more pro-immigration, clearly from, given, his platform, his policy platform that he has said. So I think, there are two problems now for immigration. One is the COVID crisis, one is Trump. And I think, at least in the surveys are showing that Trump is behind. So, you would expect that Trump might not be in power come November 2020. So, that is not going to be an issue anymore. COVID is still going to be an issue, but not too big of an issue because universities are still admitting students. And given, the classes are happening online, all they're doing is they're saying that the classes are happening online. So, you don't have to come to USA right away. You can just take the courses online for now from whichever country you're from. If you're from Turkey, if you're from India, just stay in your country for now and take the online courses. As soon as the travel ban is lifted and, things get better, you can come and do classes in person. So I wouldn't say things are bad. I would say that, it's still worth doing a PhD abroad. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. The pros versus cons of doing, this brings to the second question, pros versus cons of doing a PhD in India versus doing a PhD abroad. So when I was a master's student, our professors, they just told us that you should not try and do a PhD in India because we do not train people as well as people are trained in the USA. And there's a simple reason for it. In USA, the funding is much higher. And, there's way more professors and you get exposed to a lot more things than you would be exposed in India. So our professors just explicitly told us that given a chance, do the PhD abroad, even if you do want to come back and work in India, right? But that was very specific to economics. Now, in sciences, it could be different for the following reason, that we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world where connections matter, right? Now, you want to think about the kind of job you want to do after your PhD. And suppose you want a job in the IITs, in one of the IITs, let's say. You might want to think about, is it easier for you to get a job, the coveted job that you have, suppose the job in IIT, if you do your PhD abroad, or is it easier if you do it under, a renowned professor in IIT itself? Because the IITs are well connected, and a letter from a renowned professor from IIT might count more than, because people have connections across IITs. So the question really is, right? So the question really is that which discipline are you in, and for that discipline, what would count more towards the job that you want to do at the end of the PhD? So it's a very consequentialist kind of an answer because consequences matter. So what happens at the end of the PhD matters. And you might want to think along those lines, think ahead 6 years and try to think about which one is going to help you meet your future goals, the PhD abroad or the PhD in India, right? And I think this might already answer your third question, that what would my advice be? My advice would be, think about what you want to do, right? Think about, the pros and cons. Going abroad will give you, many different experiences, but it will also, you'll be away from family, you'll be away from friends, you'll be in a foreign land, right? So there are trade-offs. Think about how these trade-offs will play out for you. But on the other hand, many people make this decision every year. And look at your seniors, look at what they did, ask them, which universities they applied to, how has their experience been. Talk to those seniors. and not just seniors. Talk to the seniors who are working in the same lab, and who came from the same college, and talk to the seniors who are going to the same university that you would like to apply to, because you know all universities are different. Two universities are not the same. So try and get as much information as you can from people who are most relevant to the scope of the question, and then make your mind on it. And I think you do well either way. Things are going to work out either way. Everything's going to work out.
Right. So shall we end?
Manas, please end, because his time, I think 11:30. So he has
Yes.
again affect dinner and everything.
Yes,
So
yes.
we are worried that on and half hour he actually speak.
Right. So we are almost at the end of this national economics, University of California. When Maharaj told me first that it's the morning that we are going to change topic, speech, try to see what exactly I cover meaning for this speech. So I got three options. One is first experience of the day when the degree is conferred, and a graduation ceremony. And I think after listening to you and all our listeners, see, right, in our first experience like this, the day it can be like some after this COVID situation, there might be getting so much of inspiration from your speech that they will do better in life. But just go through a small summary that you have just said, and you perhaps do not have the access of access to this YouTube channel now. So many thank yous that went on from the very beginning that you started to speak, and perhaps we'll begin with later as we search that YouTube channel. However, what you have started with is that you've shared with us three lessons that you've learned in these 15 years. And it began with Jadavpur University after you graduate from our college, Rahul Ramakrishna Vivekananda Center College. And the first thing that you hinted at is working hard and to have the drive that will take you forward, to look back and realize, to get the drive to motivate yourself, that's to have that single-mindedness in you that will help you to do good in future. So this was the first lesson that you shared with us. To have a drive, to have a good thought, to have hard work in life. The second phase that you said is to have more good people, to have more good influences in life. You said about the transition period of yours, how you shifted from engineering to economics. And the best thing that you perhaps said is this, that average of five good people will always be good. So to have good influences in life is that you said to our listeners, and have a better influence. Then the third experience that you shared is definitely once again to become a producer, from not only to get into to imbibe things, but also to produce. You said about a transition of knowledge. You said about making. You do have frustrations in life that period of time, but you said the best thing over here is just to share your mathematics teacher's experience. You said that you should think whenever there is a problem, we must think about the first thing that comes to our mind, and if possible, break that problem into small issues, small parts, and solve one after another, one after another. So to make it very simpler and to address each of the problems that comes every day, not to take a cumulative way of problems, but to address each one that comes every day. You also mentioned of Mahabharata, you've mentioned of Krishna and Arjuna, and you said to all our listeners to be hardworking, to have good influences in life, and to address the problem as it comes your way. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for such a speech. There are so many praises waiting for you in the YouTube channel. So do share that and leave with them. And hope to see you again in our international webinars and so on. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Moli. Thank you, Tanuji. Thank you. Thanks to all the audience. See you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. So you take your dinner and take it.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
Good night.
please eat and eat.
Yes. Good night from California.
From good afternoon.